Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are taking a look once again at some more Pokemon VGC, still in the San Antonio Regional Championships, still in the Masters Top 16. Today is going to be a matchup between... Oh, I just did hotkeys, this is great. Stefan Mott and Carson Confer. These two have quite a few accolades to their names. We have LAIC champions, EUIC top 32s, regional champions across the board. Both of these players are rather successful, and making it to top 16 here in San Antonio is not too shabby. So in here in the Masters top 16, we have quite a few interesting teams, but with these two, we are back to the good old weather wars. We have Kyogre for Stefan Mott, along with some interesting team-ups, Qian Pao to make Urshifu Rapid Strike and Rillaboom that much stronger, and then a pretty standard Kyogre pairing with Tornadus and Serena, that Queenly Majesty, making sure that fake outs aren't really going to be doing anything to the Kyogre, Covert Cloak on Tornadus, making sure that it is going to be able to get up Tailwinds or Rain Dances as needed. Qian Pao is a stellar terrestrialization with the Focus Sash, going to be dishing out that much more damage, and another Grass Terra Rapid Strike Urshifu. It is increasingly more common. Rillaboom, high horsepower, Terra Ground. It's still going to have some weaknesses to Ice types, such as Calyrex Ice, but Rillaboom's going to have trouble with that one way or another, and the Terra Ground can help out against any fire types coming at it, or against any opposing flying types, something along those lines. Now, on the other side of the board, we have the tried and true, the rival to Kyogre, if it will show up. It's going to be a Groudon. I'm going to spoil it now. We have a Groudon here. Drought, Clear Amulet, not going to get intimidated, not that it needs to worry about that. Jumpluff and Ogerpon Hearthflame, as well as the Raging Bolt, all of these pretty standard pairings with the Groudon as well. And then Incineroar and another Single Strike Urshifu. Again, not as common as Rapid Strike Urshifu normally, but we have seen the second Single Strike Urshifu here in the top 16. Raging Bolt is going to be able to activate that Photosynthesis. Jumpluff's going to be able to activate that Chlorophyll. Both these Pokemon are going to get some pretty big boosts from Groudon's Grout. Groudon's Drought. Heat Crash on the Groudon is the fire type move of choice. Sometimes it's going to be your Fire Punch, but instead we're going for the Heat Crash. And Incineroar notably has Will-O-Wisp on it. Usually that's an answer to Calyrex Ice, but there is no fire move on Incineroar to get done in by the rain. Notably, Incineroar is Terra Water. A lot of times you'll see Terra Ghost on the Incineroar, but going for the more defensive Terra in terms of typing instead of trying to avoid opposing fake outs. Ogerpon Hearthflame Mask has kind of a mix between damage and supportive utility here. Sometimes you'll see one or the other. And Jumpluff with the Sleep Powder, it can miss, just like Precipice Blades can miss. And if you miss, it sucks. And if you don't miss, you win the video game. Rage Powder, Encore, and Tailwind round out the Jumpluff supporting utility. We're seeing a age-old matchup here since the dawn of restricted metas. Kyogre and Groudon have been the two most successful restricted Pokemon across all of VGC's history. I'll be honest, I don't have the stats immediately to back that up, but I'm pretty sure that that is the case. We're into the game here. Carson has started with the Raging Bolt and Incineroar, and Stefan has started with Urshifu and Rillaboom. These are pretty consistently the four most used Pokemon in VGC, all on the battlefield here, and we're ready to go. Incineroar's Intimidate comes through. Rillaboom is the only one really impacted by that, unless the Urshifu wants to go for a close combat, which it certainly could, but the Surging Strikes does not care about the Intimidate drop. That said, Fake Out is still very much a thing, and right now it's going to come down to if the Rillaboom or the Incineroar is faster. Raging Bolt can throw out a Thunderclap, although this Urshifu is that Terra Grass to resist any Thunderclaps or Thunderbolts coming out of the Raging Bolt. If you're Carson here, you don't have a ton of damage on the field. You know this Urshifu is Terra Grass. You know that this Rillaboom isn't going to be taking much damage. So it's kind of a question of what is the move here, Dragon Pulse or Draco Meteor, depending on whichever one the Raging Bolt has. Don't remember when I was looking at the sheet. But here we see the Terrestrialization come out for Stefan on the Urshifu Rapid Strike. It's not going to be going down. Like I said, there is no Flare Blitz on the Incineroar to try to do any damage, and it's getting hit by the Fake Out anyways. The Rillaboom is faster, which is good to note, and here comes the Surging Strikes. This Incineroar is going to go down guaranteed, and it's just going to come down to what this Raging Bolt wants to do. Carson is going to start down one Pokemon. It does have an Intimidate on the field, but Stefan is in a pretty darn good position. No Will-O-Wisps and no parting shots for Carson for the rest of the game. Life Orb recoil comes in. Thunderbolt's going to do a decent chunk of damage. Actually, not even decent. The resistance comes in huge, but the paralysis is just so rough. A great call by Stefan Mott to go into the grass terrestrialization, but a little bit of RNG can pave the way for Carson to even everything up. And Ogerpon Hearthflame coming in here is absolutely massive. It has a fire type Ivy Cudgel, which will love to hit into either of these two Pokemon. And with Urshifu's speed getting halved thanks to this paralysis, it's not going to be able to move before this Ogerpon, almost guaranteed. And so it's going to have to come down to, does Stefan Mott want to try to use a high horsepower into the Ogerpon and risk either Rillaboom or Urshifu going down to this Ivy Cudgel? Now, switching out is always an option, but Raging Bolt and Ogerpon both do a lot of damage. It is Assault Vest and Fire Mask, so there's not like big damaging items, but just the moves, just the power of these two Pokemon themselves. We see right there, Urshifu falls to the single Ivy Cudgel, no crit, no nothing, no nada. If Stefan did bring a Kyogre, that could have potentially been something to bring in, but we see the Electroweb coming out of Raging Bolt anyways. That would have done good damage to the Kyogre. It would have slowed it down and would have caused a lot more problems for Stefan Mott. Another critical hit coming in, just a little salt on the wound. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does enough to, cause problems in the future, although it will get slightly mitigated by this grassy terrain. We did see the high horsepower going into the Raging Bolt. It did not do much damage. The Intimidate that Incineroar laid out on Carson's first turn still coming in clutch. We do see Chien Pao coming out now. So even though there is an Intimidate on Stefan's Rillaboom, it will still be able to do a considerable amount of damage. That said, so will this Ogerpon. Chien Pao is Focus Sash, so it's going to have to be careful what move it selects. If it does not choose a priority move, Raging Bolt could potentially Thunderclap it, then followed up by an Ogerpon with any of its damaging moves to potentially take it out. If you're Rillaboom here, you have to make a hard decision. Do you go for a priority move as well? Do you try to go for another high horsepower? You saw that it didn't do very much damage. We do know that Icicle Crash is going to be super effective into a Dragon type, but Carson, he's going into a terrestrialization here. It looks like it's going to be the Ogerpon Hearthflame taking away that grass weakness, making any ice type moves now not very effective, and just giving that Ogerpon Hearthflame even more of an attack boost. If it wasn't going to take out anything before, it certainly will now. There we see the Thunderclap. Chien Pao's Focus Sash is broken. That's the most important thing. Grassy Glide comes through. A little bit more chip damage onto Raging Bolt, but nothing too crazy. Icicle Crash, this is going to be the big thing, but Raging Bolt avoids the attack. That is huge. Stefan just can't quite seem to catch a break here, but those misses, any of those moves that can miss, it is just absolutely brutal. We see the Ivy Cudgel come through. That move is one that will never miss. Ogerpon's HP is restored a little bit, so is Raging Bolt, and Carson is in a phenomenal spot here. Even with this Kyogre switching in, you can see on Stefan's face in that picture-in-picture, he is not having a good time. The Drizzle comes through. It does make the Ogerpon Ivy Cudgel that much weaker. However, Raging Bolt loves to see a Kyogre on the other side of the battlefield. Thunderclap is a very powerful move, and with it being super effective, no Kyogre is going to want to see that. Water Spout does a lot of damage here, and Stefan, I don't know if you want to risk missing another move like Origin Pulse, but that said, Water Spout's power is going to be greatly decreased due to a Thunderclap coming out almost certainly into this Kyogre. There's no way that this Rillaboom is going to be able to take out the Raging Bolt. Again, just a little bit more damage at a time. The Wood Hammer comes through from the Ogerpon. That's going to one-shot this Kyogre. That calculation is almost never survivable unless you terrestrialize. I'll be honest, I don't know, maybe you can max defense, but I don't think it's happening. And Stefan is left with just Rillaboom on the battlefield. Draco Meteor comes out from Raging Bolt, but at the end of the day, this is all about wrapped up. All Carson has to do is, if there is a Groudon in the back, bring it in, Ivy Cudgel, bada bing, bada boom, and that is game number 1 in the books. You saw that Erod. That just goes to show that missing moves is brutal. Carson didn't have any moves other than that Draco Meteor at the end that were really going to risk missing, and just having that be your MO, that you're just not gonna use moves that miss, it makes your life way, way easier in Pokemon. That said, sometimes you do have to take risks to win games like that. The paralysis on that Urshifu was absolutely brutal. You do not like to see that if you are Stefan, and that absolutely changed the course of the game. Terra Grass Rapid Strike Urshifu is going to be doing a ton of damage with Surging Strikes consistently, especially up against an Ogerpon Heartflame. Losing that speed is a massive, massive detriment. But at the same time, you know, Carson got a little bit lucky. You have to buy a ticket in order to win the lottery. And that's exactly what Carson got here. Minimized RNG for himself, maximized how RNG could help him against his opponent. And unfortunately, if you're Stefan, you're kind of left scratching your head if that paralysis doesn't go through, if you don't miss the Icicle Crash. You know, maybe there's a world, maybe you can get something going there, but he didn't have any speed control, didn't bring it with him. No Tornadus was there. The Rillaboom was putting in some work, but never got an opportunity to switch out after that Incineroar. And even though that Incineroar went down on the first turn, intimidating the Rillaboom and massively limiting its damage output absolutely had an impact on this game. That Raging Bolt just was never going down at all. Now, if you're Carson, you almost have to wonder, though, was the game plan going in correct? Like, was that the right game plan to try to hit this paralysis and try to make that pop? Or do you have to change it up? So we're going to go ahead and get into game number 2 here of the Masters Top 16 between Carson Confer and Stefan Mott. Raging Bolt and Incineroar once again are the leads, and once again Rillaboom and Rapid Strike Urshifu are what Stefan brings. So this looks very, very similar. If you're Stefan, you might just be thinking, hey, look, if I don't get paralyzed, we win the game, right? That's what happened before. We're going to try to make it happen again. We know the Rillaboom is faster than the Incineroar. We know that that Fake Out is going to be moving first. And now for Carson, do you gamble again on getting that paralysis, or do you maybe go for a Draco Meteor? Try to guarantee that this Urshifu goes down, make some swaps, make some different decisions. We're going to have to see. The Terastallization comes out. We saw it last game. We see it this game. Terra, Grass, Rapid Strike, Urshifu. Resists electric type moves, resists ground type moves. Grass type Terras have been all in vogue here recently. And again, no threat from this Incineroar because it is about to get KO'd. Again, we know how all of this goes. This is the exact same turn 1 as before, other than, you know, the 2 positions that the Rillaboom and the Urshifu are in. Doesn't matter because there's no Ditto in this matchup. We're going to see, I will bet money on a Thunderbolt coming out here from the Raging Bolt. Urshifu loses some of its HP. Thunderbolt comes through. Does the para come through? It does not. Urshifu is still standing. It still has its speed. So Carson's game plan now has to change. Actually, maybe it doesn't. Ogerpon is here, and it is ready to make things happen. It's facing down 2 grass types. It doesn't mind those odds, but one of those grass types is that Rapid Strike Urshifu. Surging Strikes is still going to be doing a ton of damage, if not outright KOing Ogerpon. Unless it is fairly bulky. Not all of these Heartflame Ogerpons are fully invested in speed. Some of them are invested in some HP, in some bulk to also provide utility, because Ivy Cudgel just does that damage all on its own. For Stefan, you now can say, okay, well, what was my game plan in game 1 going to be if I wasn't paralyzed? The Detect comes out from the Urshifu, deciding to scout out a little bit where this Ivy Cudgel is going. It's going into the Urshifu slot. That is important to know. Now, again, we don't know the exact speed tiers between the Urshifu and the Ogerpon. Rillaboom gets hit by a Thunderbolt, but a high horsepower comes through, taking Raging Bolt down to a little over half HP. The Grassy Terrain Recovery is going to buff it up a little bit more. It's not going to be a 2-shot. It might be a 3-hit KO. So now, Stefan, you know in general what this Ogerpon is going to want to do. It can't protect in front of the Urshifu. The Surging Strikes will go right through it. So if you're Stefan Mott, you know that this Ogerpon is likely to choose another offensive move. Do you try to mitigate the Ivy Cudgel damage by swapping in Kyogre into one of your slots? Which is potentially what Carson was anticipating. That Rillaboom would get taken out, Kyogre would come in, Surging Strikes would start trying to tear through Carson's team, but Kyogre would take a decent chunk of damage. We're going to see a switch here. Urshifu is going back into Stefan's party, and we're going to see the Kyogre come out. I do love the names here. Kyogre, the model for paintings. It is a gorgeous Pokemon. One of the best shinies, modeled after an orca whale. It's absolutely gorgeous. The Drizzle comes through. Ivy Cudgel's damage is going to be mitigated, but Carson going for that terrestrialization once again. The Hearth Flame Mask making its appearance, buffing up the Hearthflame Ogerpon's attack stat, as well as the Terra Fire typing. This Ivy Cudgel, it's cut by the rain, but it's boosted by everything else. Ivy Cudgel comes through. This is going to be doing a lot of damage to whatever it hits, even if it is going into the Kyogre. It takes it down. It's about a third. Not quite as much as I was anticipating, but the Thunderbolt goes into the Rillaboom. It does not go into the Kyogre. Woodhammer comes out now. That's going to be resisted. I was about to say, I think that's going to do even less damage, and it gives you recoil. I guess the call there is that maybe you're going to switch out into the Groudon, but now we have a Raging Bolt, which is in a pretty scary range. That said, I am almost certain that this Ogerpon outspeeds Kyogre. And again, a single Woodhammer is going to do numbers. It will always KO Kyogre from this HP, from really any HP. Again, unless it is maxed out on defensive stats, even then, I think it still KOs. So, for Stefan, are you willing to lose your Kyogre here to allow Rillaboom to potentially take down Raging Bolt? Are you willing to lose the rain? I'm almost certain that Carson has Groudon in the back. It's not guaranteed. We don't know exactly what the fourth Pokemon is, but it would be very, very likely. Now, Kyogre can also go for Protect if needed. That will give it one more turn on the field. But instead, Stefan switches out. Qianpao comes in. This is going to make sure that whatever Rillaboom attacks, it is probably going to take out here. The Thunderclap notably goes into the Kyogre slot and does not hit. Ivy Cudgel comes through. It's going into Rillaboom. This is almost certainly going to take down the Grass Monkey, which it does. Stefan Mott loses his first Pokemon of game number 2. It is 3 Pokemon to 3 Pokemon. Raging Bolt is down in HP, but I'm going to be honest, I like Carson's position here a heck of a lot more. Your Weather Setter still hasn't come out yet, but you're still doing damage, and this Ogerpon has taken no damage and is still a massive offensive threat, even in the rain. Especially with that Qianpao now, essentially helping it out on its own. This is going to be a very difficult position for Stefan to navigate. While Kyogre is a great Pokemon, while all these Pokemon are very, very strong, Ogerpon Hearthflame is just doing so much work here. If Stefan Mott cannot find an answer to this Pokemon, Carson is going to be able to lock up this game in only a matter of time. Both these players are making really kind of game deciding decisions right here on this turn. This turn is absolutely pivotal. We see the Groudon come out now. I don't know if Stefan switched anything out. Raging Bolt likely was the slowest Pokemon on the field. That Sun is here. Icicle Crash is going to do a considerable chunk of damage. Groudon is still a ground type. It goes down to about a quarter HP. Ivy Cudgel comes through, though. This is going to KO whichever one it wants. Well, not KO. The Focus Edge is still alive. But Urshifu gets obliterated. That was never not going to happen, unfortunately, unless Stefan wanted to go for an Aqua Jet to try to get a little bit of chip damage in. Opted not to do that. Qianpao is chilling out now on the battlefield, is going to have to hope that pairing up with this Kyogre is going to lead it to victory. Qianpao is going to be faster than Groudon, but I am uncertain if it is going to be able to deal with this Ogerpon Hearthflame. The rain is set up. Carson, though, can switch out back into the Raging Bolt, bring the Groudon back in later. That said, Qianpao can still do some damage. Unfortunately, if you're Kyogre, you're just dead to the Ogerpon here. Unless you want to hit the Protect button, hope that maybe Qianpao, through a combination of Icicle Crashes, Sucker Punches, can get this Ogerpon down in 2 turns. That's the fear, that the Spiky Shield is there and is going to break this Focus Sash. The Protect comes through from Groudon, scouting out what moves Stefan is going for. The Icicle Crash comes in. It is not a contact move, luckily, so there is no damage going in or being reflected back at the Qianpao. Water Spout comes in. Now, Carson has an idea of what Stefan wanted to go for. The question is, what is the call now? Does Stefan go for a Protect? Does Qianpao go for a different move? Does it go for a higher priority move? Icicle Crash comes out again. It's going to do a little bit of damage here. about a third of it, but Ogerpon is still very, very healthy. The Woodhammer comes in, goes into the Groudon spot. Groudon goes down. There's going to be some recoil, but that is not going to matter at the end of the day. And we see Stefan Mott standing up here, offering the hand of concession. Heat Crash comes through into the Chien Pao. Once again, it is not at a speed that is going, or it does not have enough damage. It does not have a spread move. That is going to be it for game number 2. And Carson Confer is going to be moving on to the top 8 of the San Antonio Regional Championships. Another 2-0 in very, very dominant fashion this time. Groudon didn't even play that big of a factor. It was all about that Hearthflame Ogerpon and the impact that a turn 1 Intimidate can have on a game. If you don't have a good answer for these Ogerpons in this regulation, even if you do have good answers to the very powerful Restricteds, the Ogerpons can just absolutely dominate a game. As we saw, even in Rain, Hearthflame Ogerpon can do massive damage with that Fire-type Ivy Cudgel through its Terastallization, and has great answers to Water-type threats that would oppose it, or Ground-type threats that would oppose it, with that Woodhammer doing massive, massive damage with the Embody Aspect attack boost. So, if you're looking for Pokemon to be scared of or to use on your own team, check out Hearthflame Ogerpon. Any of the Ogerpons, really. They have quite a lot to provide. Groudon wins this match of the Weather Wars, and we will be seeing Carson Confer in the top 8 along with a few other players here in a bit. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.